on, everybody? Welcome back to Chuds BBQ. My name is Bradley Robinson, and today I'm going to show you how I made these beautiful, smoky, direct heat, beefy beef back ribs. Coming up, beef back ribs. Not too commonly seen at Texas barbecue joints or on restaurant menus in general. And that's probably because the yield is pretty terrible, especially when you consider how much space they take up on your cooker. But we'll talk more about that later. That being said, I think the beef back rib is the perfect cut for the backyard barbecuer. Basically, you're getting a beef rib that's the same size as a spare rib, cooks up really quickly, and tastes good no matter how you cook it. Hot and fast, low and slow, grilled, it always comes out tasting great. But today, we're making beef back ribs on the mini Chud box, and it is going to be delicious. These are beef back ribs. Basically, what these are is the baby back ribs of the cow, meaning they come from the loin section. But on a cow, the loin is also known as the ribeye or the prime rib. So basically what we got here is the bony backside of the ribeye. When they're butchering down a cow, they're trying to maximize all of the more expensive cuts they have. So when they're taking a ribeye off of the bones, they're trying to keep as much steak as possible, which is why these are pretty bare as far as meat is concerned. Which is why you're gonna see the bones popping through. You always get a lot of shiners with these. But these are actually particularly meaty, and when you're trying to look for them at the store, you wanna find the meatiest ones possible. But where they lack in meat on top of the bones, they're definitely not as beefy as, say, a short rib, because we're not really aiming for the meat on top of the bones as we are the meat in between the bones. And that is some beautiful ribeye meat in there, which is why these always cook up so tasty. Crazy how meaty they look right now, but once they're cooked, all this meat is gonna shrink up and it's gonna be not as beautiful as it is right now. Just like baby back ribs or St. Louis cut ribs, this is a great beginner cut because you don't have to do any butchery to them. They are pretty much ready to go out of the package. They've got a membrane on the back. I like to leave it on. I'm a membrane on kind of guy, but also because there's such little meat on here, the membrane is really gonna keep all these bones together, which is gonna help in the cooking process. All you need to do is take them out of the package, hit them with some rub, and throw them on the cooker. Because we are dealing with beef ribs, I'm gonna treat these pretty simply. I'm just gonna go with a little salt and pepper, just like I would on a spare rib. So I'm gonna start out with some kosher salt, just gonna get a nice coverage, not too heavy, not too light. Basically just a nice even coat. These are pretty thin, just like most ribs, so you don't wanna go too heavy on them. If I could have one granule spread evenly across, that's what I would do. And then we're gonna go through and hit it with some 16 mesh black pepper. I'll have links in the description for that as well. That's it, just real simple, good, even, strong coating. Like a lot of pepper. There's really not much reason to do the back on beef ribs because it's a membrane, it's not really gonna penetrate the meat, but maybe we'll throw a little pepper on there just to make it look good. That's it, that's all we're gonna do to these. We're just gonna let these chill out here. The salt's gonna kind of start penetrating the meat, draw a little moisture. It's gonna help all the peppers stick while we get our fire started. It's at this stage you could add any beef rub you like. Anything that goes well on beef ribs will do great here. But again, you wanna make sure you don't put too much salt just because they are quite thin ribs, but they're gonna cook up great. When it comes to using direct heat cookers, whether it's a vertical pit, an ugly drum, or anything like that, the best way to go about it is using live coals. Typically, burn barrels are pretty commonplace. You're gonna see a lot of people burning logs down into coals and then shoveling them under the pigs or the grates or whatever they're cooking. But for the home cook, that's not really too practical, so there's a few ways to go about it. You can use charcoal, light it, let it catch, hope for the best. You can go chimney by chimney. That's a great way to get yourself up to temp. Or what I just did is I just made a big fire in my offset to burn down all these logs into coals, and now I'm gonna throw them into this here mini Chud box just to get things started. And then I'm gonna add some logs in there, and I'm just gonna let these burn down naturally inside of the Chud box. And once we get up to a nice temp around 300 degrees, we'll start cooking. Burn, baby, burn. Now that we are rocking a solid coal bed, I'm gonna shut this down and get our ribs on. We're cooking at a solid 300 degrees, which is right about where I want it. I'm gonna just pop these bad boys on, bone side down, and we're gonna let them cook for the next hour or so. Ooh, there's a snake in my boot. There's a snake in my boot. All right, 1 hour in, and these bad boys are looking great. We're gonna give them a flip over. We're gonna cook them pretty hot and fast, right around 300, 325 this whole time. And as you can see, the back is nice and crisp up. Got some nice crispy membranes on there. Pepper's cooked on nicely. Now we're gonna get some color on the other side, and then we will start mopping. If you're familiar with old school style Texas barbecue, I'm talking Cooper's, Snow's, Hill Country style barbecue, you're gonna be familiar with the Mop Sauce, which is basically a thinned out barbecue sauce full of onions and garlic and a whole bunch of good flavors that's pretty thin, that is used to mop on top of the meat as it cooks. This is a great time to add extra flavor to your beef without adding it to the rub itself. So today we're gonna make a pretty classic Mop Sauce and start hitting these ribs with it as soon as we flip them over. To our pot here, we are going to throw in a few sticks of butter and let that melt right on down. In the meantime, we are going to roughly chop up a white onion. This is a whole white onion. You can go less if you want, but we're going to cook this down in the butter a little bit just to mellow out some of the harsher flavors. While we're at it, we're also going to throw in a handful of garlic. Now that these have cooked down a little bit, they're nice and translucent, we're gonna keep adding in the rest of our ingredients, including big fat pinch of some dry mustard. A little extra flavor, can't go wrong with that. We're also gonna go in with a whole lemon, squeezed first, and then, we'll just throw the whole thing in there, why not? It's gonna add some nice brightness and acidity. Boink. While we're at it, we'll toss in a big old squirt of some hot sauce. A little extra acidity, a little extra heat. Can't go wrong with that. We're just gonna let this cook down for another little bit. Oh, that smells so good. Next up is when we would add some more flavor. I would usually add some garlic powder, maybe some cumin, some chili powders, shot of Worcestershire sauce, maybe some ketchup, just to really round things out. But I just so happen to have all of those things already mixed up for me in this Leroy & Lewis Beet barbecue sauce. On sale now at LeroyandLewisBBQ.com. So we're just gonna go in with about a cup of that, just to make everything nice and tasty. Beep. One more thing that we need to make this Mop Sauce a Mop Sauce is to thin it out a little bit. You could easily add some beef broth or some water or some stock, anything you got. But for me, I'm gonna go with a little bit of beer. And by that I mean a whole beer. Now we're just gonna bring this up to a simmer, let everything get to know each other a little bit in the pot here, and then we'll start mopping. All right, 2 hours in, now we are gonna flip these bad boys back over and start a mopping. Beautiful color, starting to pull away from the bones. Now we're just gonna add some wonderful flavor, get some onions on there. Not a problem in my book. This is gonna keep everything moist, add some really nice flavors, as well as dripping onto the coals, creating some really nice steam, extra flavor. So good. Let them keep cooking. All right, we're almost about 3 hours into this cook. We're still rocking a solid 300 degrees, which is very nice. Holding strong, and these little guys are looking real nice. I'm gonna go through every 15, 20 minutes or so. Give them another mop. Make sure, getting a little steamy. Make sure we're building those layers of flavor. Let the sauce cook on a little bit, then add some more. Oh, what a beautiful sight. Ooh. So I've mopped these about 5 or 6 times every 10, 20, 30 minutes or so, and they are looking delicious. They are starting to pull back from the bones. Meat's feeling nice and tender. Smell is fantastic. So now it's time to wrap these up. Before we wrap these up, we are gonna give them one last mopping, a nice heavy mopping, just to introduce a little bit of moisture and one last little bit of flavor before they get wrapped up. I want these nice and saucy. And then, like most ribs, when we wrap these, we are gonna flip them over. That way, when all the juices and steam and everything starts pooling at the bottom, it's gonna hit the meat instead of the bones. So, flip these bone side up. We're gonna hit the back with a nice bit of mop as well. And then we're just gonna wrap them up. We're gonna throw these back on the cooker to cook for another 15, 20 minutes or so. Let them steam a little bit inside of the foil. Then we'll pull them out, let them rest, and slice in. 4 hours of cooking and 1 hour of resting later. Let's see how these ribs came out. As you can see, they're looking nice and tender, nice and juicy. Oh God, they smell so good. That mop is really coming through. Nice acidity, all the wonderful flavors. So now, it's time to slice them up. When slicing beef back ribs, what you really want to do is utilize the Hollywood cut, which basically means skipping every other bone to double the meat per rib. So, what I mean by that is on this end here, we're going to slice off this little end bone. Great little snack for the pitmaster there. And then we're going to hug this bone right here. Then, we're going to sacrifice this bone by cutting nice and close to that. So what we're doing is we've lost this entire bone that's got no meat on it. Got a little bit for gnawing, good for the dogs. But what we're left with is this single bone with double meat. Look at that meat, that looks so good. Again, we're just gonna hug this bone. Again, bare bone out, and then double meat on this one. So essentially we're cutting our yield in half, right? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 ribs that are nice and meaty, but we've also got 3.5 ribs here that are just gonna go into stock or whatever. So that's why we don't really see these on menus too much. But for the backyarder, these are great as far as I'm concerned for making soups and stocks and broths and all that stuff. And in the meantime, we get some beautiful, smoky, tender meat to enjoy. That is spectacular. It's not often you get to eat ribeye meat cooked to tenderness like that. It's so rich, such great flavor from the mop and the smoke. Nice clean bite through bite, nice and meaty. Highly recommend giving this a try. As you can see, this meat is nice and tender. Good smoke ring on there. Still nice and juicy, of course. Wonderful flavor from the smoke, from the mop. Ah! Gotta love it. And there we have it, folks. A big old pile of super meaty, double-sided beef back ribs. Highly recommend giving this one a try. Super tasty, really nice tender meat, and they're pretty cheap at the grocery store. And we're also left with all these bones. Do not go throwing these away. They make for a great stock, especially in these colder months. Make a soup, make a ramen, make something like that. There's something about a good beef back rib that just tastes so classic Texas barbecue. It's got that old school vibe to it. The direct heat smoke, that mop sauce on top. Totally different flavor from any other rib you're gonna get. So tender. Nice and tender. Super yummy. Nice and fatty. This one's for pee-pee. Hey, you want to come eat some beef back ribs?
I guess. I have a cinder block pit in my parents' backyard. When I would cook on it, I was making mop sauce, and we had like an old cookbook from mid to early '80s, classic Texas cookbook, and it had this like classic Texas mop sauce in there.
For real?
Yeah.
I'm a fan of the mop sauce. The only thing I'm not a fan of is cleaning the mop.
It's the hardest thing to do.
Alright, y'all, that is it. That is my version of how to smoke beef back ribs. I highly recommend giving this recipe a try. This is definitely a cut that should not be overlooked. If you do give this recipe a try, hit me up on Instagram at ChudsBBQ. I love to see what y'all are cooking. Head over to ChudsBBQ.com for all smoker building information. Let me know in the comments below what you want to see me cook next. And until the next time I see you, please go cook something outside. Peace.